views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, time for the Bronx Buzz. The Bronx Buzz is BronxNet's program that gives you a look inside what journalists are thinking about, what they're writing about. Sometimes we have photographers and sometimes we have videographers as well. And tonight, not only do we have a journalist, but we have an elected official who's going to put on his journalist hat and do a little reporting for us about what's going on up in Albany. But we will start right in with my longtime friend who is now with the City Limits. It is Jeanmarie Evelly, who is calling in on Skype from City Limits. Nice to have you with us, Jeanmarie.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
Jeanmarie writes, I guess, not exclusively, but largely about MTA issues and transit issues.
Yes, that's correct. I've been, since I started here at City Limits, which was in March, I've been mostly covering the transportation beat, but I dabble here and there outside of it sometimes too.
I know you have broad interests otherwise, but I do just want to ask you in general before, because we're going to talk about fare hikes and we're going to talk about all these other issues. Just in general, after covering this beat for a little while, what have you learned? You got any general impressions of, like, you know, like, are we all screwed? Are there subways and buses that, you just give me some general vision for somebody who's covered the beat for a little while.
Sure. So I think the MTA and the subways in particular, as most of us probably know from just taking them frequently, are in a state of crisis, as they have been for the past year or so. But what's been happening, at least for the past 6 months that I've been covering this beat, is that elected officials and the MTA and advocates, a lot of them mostly, are really pushing for, it feels like we're a little bit at sort of a breaking point, that the system is in sort of a dire need for improvements now, and finding the money to make those improvements is the big question on everybody's mind. So that's sort of the state of things.
Listen, and frankly, you haven't given us insight that we don't really know on our own. I was curious about, do you have any thoughts? We hadn't talked, I was going to mention this, but it occurred to me when you were responding, the whole idea of Joe Lhota stepping down. You know, I mean, I don't know what's in his mind personally, but it wasn't exactly a mission accomplished. Like, okay, now my work is done here. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Sure, yeah. I think it was somewhat unexpected because I think Joe Lhota, I was reading in the Times, he had said recently that he, I think, hadn't expected to end his tenure so quickly. But the line that I've been hearing from folks is that they consider the system to be stabilizing. So it's not necessarily, the subways in particular are not necessarily getting better quite yet, but they're stabilizing. So in the least, they're not, I guess, getting worse is what they've been saying. I think that Lhota considered it like his job was to come in during this emergency hour and sort of get things stabilized, and I think he considers that to have been accomplished, but I'm sure riders could probably debate that.
Yeah, probably not everybody is on that same page. Yeah. And I will just say as an aside, for the second time now, and this pertains directly to the Bronx, is former Bronx Borough President Fernando Ferrer is, what a good soldier he is. It's not like they asked him to step in to do something easy, to step in to be the chair of the MTA. That's a heck of a thing. Anyway, I didn't see it yet because you told me that just today you posted a new article about fare hikes. Before we even talk about funding and everything else, riders and everybody in the Bronx is going to want to know about. So what is the latest on the notion of fare hikes?
So there hasn't been anything super new that was announced this week because the idea that they're going to raise fares in 2019 has already been on the table and been discussed for at least the past 6 months. It was discussed in July that they were looking at a potential 4% fare hike in 2019. And this goes back to 2009, where the MTA has been every other year instituting these sort of smaller fare hikes, these 4% fare hikes. They say below the rate of inflation. So that's sort of, I guess, supposed to make us feel a little bit bit better about it. But that has been the pattern since 2009, is that the fares have been sort of slowly increasing every other year, and they're on track to do that again for 2019 and 2021. And that's what they were discussing at the board meeting this morning, was the actual proposed budget. And if they're going to, people have been saying that. So yesterday I attended a press conference that this advocacy group Riders Alliance hosted, where they're basically saying that they shouldn't institute that planned 4% fare hike until elected officials and MTA leaders identify some other source of funding for the MTA and for fixing the public transit system, feeling that it's unfair to go forward with the sort of planned fare hikes that they were going to do anyway, because the service has been so unpredictable and so bad. So there's a little bit of debate there. But the MTA is planning on, at this point, they haven't voted on it yet, but they have proposed fare hikes for 2019.
We now have come full circle from the first part of our discussion to now. And the question is there enough money? The numbers that you hear about what it will cost, to fix the subways. And, just as a rider and as somebody in the Bronx, you step back and you say, well, wait a minute, if the tracks are, need to be replaced, these are very big and expensive jobs. If you're talking about new signal systems, this is a very large system. I don't even know where to begin this dialogue about how to really, swoop in and solve the MTA's problems unless, we can come up with funding. I wish I had another answer. Mayor and the governor have to stop fighting, and they have to stop fighting over the MTA and stop blaming each other. But everybody needs money to do this. I don't know how else. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're very right. The MTA is already not in good shape financially on its own, even without thinking about the so-called Fast Forward plan, which is New York City Transit President Andy Byford's plan to modernize and upgrade the whole transit system, which would include, part of his plan is to upgrade the signal system, like you mentioned, for the entire subway system in the next decade, I think he said, which is a very sped up timeline compared to what the MTA has been kind of slowly upgrading the signal system. And that's going to be, I think, one of the biggest costs. They haven't put an exact price tag on that plan yet, but the figures we've seen floating around and estimates for that would be something between 40 and 60 billion, which is a huge amount, I'm sure, as you know, and where that's going to come from hasn't been identified.
Come on, Madam Transit Reporter, give us an answer.
I wish I knew.
Write us a check.
Obviously is the thing everyone's been calling for, but even congestion pricing would only bring in about $1 billion a year. It would not be enough to fill that giant hole.
You took the words right out of my mouth. The next thing, you did do a story a couple of weeks ago about congestion pricing. Talk about super commuters and how, and that really was the focus of your story, and how congestion pricing, I don't know, could extract money from them. Talk a little bit about that. And then the last thing before we let you go, I do want to talk about the buses, but let's get this done first.
Sure, yeah. So the super commuter story was actually saying that there was a report that had come out from the same group, that Riders Alliance group that I had mentioned before. They had looked at and done some number crunching for how much time they think congestion pricing, based on what experts say it will speed up traffic, in some of the busiest parts of Manhattan, and would speed up traffic into parts leading into the busiest parts of Manhattan. So they're saying that they were trying to pitch it as this would really help those super commuters, these bus riders who travel from transit deserts in the outer boroughs, a lot of them in Queens, some of them in the Bronx too, who usually take the express bus routes, which can be the longer kind of haul through the city into Manhattan, and that it would save them congestion pricing in speeding up traffic in the city and making things move a little faster, would help them shave up to an hour or 2 hours a week off their commutes, which would be obviously probably very appreciated by people who have those very long rides into Manhattan.
Yeah, let's move into this. The MTA is doing a little bus tour, or a tour of Bronx neighborhoods, asking people about what they think about the buses. Do you have a sense of what people are saying about bus routes? Are they saying the whole thing needs to be overhauled? Do they just have kind of normal complaints? What do you think the net result of this bus tour is going to mean for the riders who ride above the ground on the MTA?
Sure, yeah. Well, bus riders, as you probably know, they tend to be senior citizens rely on the bus network a lot. And one of the things that was outlined in Andy Byford's plan was to overhaul the whole bus network and sort of look at it and make changes where they need to make it more efficient, to make things run smoother. That could include, so they've already done this on Staten Island. They reworked some of the bus routes there. They removed some stops, I believe, on some of the bus routes in Staten Island that they considered sort of too close together in order to speed up some of those bus rides. So that's what they're doing in the Bronx now, is sort of asking people for feedback in terms of what they can do to the Bronx bus network to make it work a little bit better. Some of these bus routes have been updated in decades.
Yeah, of course, the Bronx bus networks would be much more complicated than they are in Staten Island. There's no question about it. As I understand it from the little feedback that I've seen through some of these things, through some of the reports about the meetings, among the things that Bronxites are talking about is kind of real-time notifications. And, it'd be nice to see them. They claim that they have it together, although I've been standing waiting for buses, and you don't know what's going on out there.
Yeah. Anybody who waits for the bus knows that there can be long waits.
Time. Jeanmarie, you are just great, and having access to you when we can on the Bronx Buzz is truly a pleasure, and it provides great information for all of us in the Bronx. So keep up the great work, and say hello to all my buddies down there at City Limits, and we hope to have you on again one time.
Will do. Thanks so much, Gary. Have a good day.
You too. All right, there you go. Jeanmarie Evelly from City Limits. We're going to take a break, and Assemblyman Louis Sepúlveda will join us. He's at his office, and he's going to be on Skype as well. We're going to talk about a lot of things going on in Albany, and he's got a point of view, much like a journalist does. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self. And I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go long, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa! Master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
think getting dumped by text is harsh. Try getting dumped by a tennis ball. My ex-owner drove me out to the woods, yelled fetch, and by the time I bought the ball back, he was gone. Yeah, I was pissed. But the folks at the shelter helped me let go of my anger. I learned coping skills, like taking it to the hole. Boom! Now I'm ready to fetch again. But how about I throw and you run and get it?
Our guest for the second segment this evening is Assemblyman Louis Sepúlveda, who is joining us from his office over there in, I guess, in Soundview, right? Where are you? Oh, near Parkchester? Where are you? You used to have the office on Westchester Avenue. Still there?
No, I'm now on by Intervale and Rogers Place, closer to the Hunts Point train station and the Intervale train station.
I guess the district changed once you became a senator, so you got a new spot.
Yes, I did.
Congratulations on that. And I don't know, it looks like maybe the video went out. Can he still hear me, or did we lose that call altogether? There you go.
I can hear you.
All right,
Okay.
very good. Senator, talk to me about the reaction. Give me a little inside, like be the reporter. What were some of your colleagues saying after the midterm elections, knowing that the state Senate was going to be changing its majority toward the Democrats?
Well, I think we from the very beginning, those that have been elected, I was only there as of April, but the leader of the Senate, we had a plan. The leadership certainly had a plan to make sure that we're prepared to lead the Senate so that we don't have the issues that we had 10 years ago. So, that was part of the plan. We have to exhibit a certain level of discipline and take into consideration that we are a very diverse conference with interests that a little more conservative in the upper regions of Long Island, more progressive liberal in the city. But we as a colleague have to take into consideration the impacts of our policies and legislation throughout the entire state, and not be so myopic and think of only our particular Senate districts.
Well, that's a fascinating thing, because historically there has been, this conflict between downstate and upstate. Do you think you and your colleagues really sat and said, you know what, we're all in this together? That would be refreshing to hear, frankly.
Well, no, certainly that conversation began even before the elections, because again, you do have some people there, some really smart people in the leadership. You got people like Mike Gianaris and Kevin Parker. I'd like to think that I can contribute something. The leader, Stuart Cousins, they were there before, and if you don't learn from your mistakes, then we will lose the majority again. A lot of the people that were elected recently were very progressive, very liberal, even up north. Someone like Rachel May, who was a little bit more, a little less to the center, as traditionally you get up there. But there's very many topics that may be taboo up north that we can deal with here. For example, I'll tell you one right off the bat is, I'm pushing for the driver's license bill that allow undocumented immigrants to get a driver's license. That issue may be a little bit more difficult for the members up north and Long Island. We've already heard Republican Senator Axer make terribly uninformed comments about the driver's license bill, saying that we have to take care of our people first before taking care of undocumented, as if one thing is related to the other. I'm hearing a lot of the hate mongering that really emanates.
Senator, let's pursue that for a second. It is a controversial bill, and conceptually, when you step from the outside and you look at it and you say, wait a minute, these people are not documented. Of course, the charges, they're here illegally. Why should they be given this, number one, an ID that gives them a state ID, which does give them some privileges, and then number two, the ability to move around. There's a lot of resentment for people who are undocumented.
I understand there are 11 states and D.C. who have already passed this type of legislation, and it's been extremely successful. If we can get beyond the fear and the hate, I think people, when they do a financial analysis of the bill, for example, very initially, you'll have about a $26 million benefit to the local coffers, which you can use to fix roads or pay for.
Where does that money come from? Why do you have that benefit?
When you file, when these undocumented are going to Department of Motor Vehicles and filing for their licenses, The initial hit is projected to be about $26 million.
I see,
And
just
then,
simply the registration fees.
oh, yeah, everything
Yeah,
that comes with getting a
licensing.
license.
Right.
And then after that, they project about $52 million a year. But look at the big picture. Undocumented live in the dark. And if I am an undocumented, I am afraid that, if I'm a victim of a crime, I certainly would be concerned of going to the police. And that's unfair to a human being, just for being a human being, period. But also, when you look...
Let me just ask about that, if you would. So that would suggest that somebody who has maybe a job or needs to go to work or needs to, transport in some form would then drive a car but not have a license, and then really jeopardize a lot by potentially running a red light or having some other issue. Even if it's not your fault, because you could be in an accident that's somebody else's fault.
Well, that's another very well put, Gary. At least now these individuals can acquire automobile insurance. So if someone's injured, property damage or physical damage, then you have an insurance carrier that can cover the cost of any injury or of any property damage. People that are undocumented will also go shopping more often. They'll go to the commercial centers and start bringing more dollars to businesses. People who are undocumented, they'll have young children who maybe they're not getting medical care or not being taken to the doctor. If there's an emergency, won't take them to the hospitals. People that are undocumented would like to have bank accounts. And
this leads us into a whole other dialogue, which I really was interested to have with you, because you have supported progressive causes. You were a supporter of Bernie Sanders and other progressive candidates. It's clear there is a progressive movement in the Democratic Party. Fascinating that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was protesting outside the office of the Speaker of the House. So I guess, is there room in the Democratic Party for a progressive movement of this size? And how does it play, and how do you think it will play? Will it play at all in the New York State Senate? And then we can go back and talk about, the other issues. But I'm very curious as to what you think about this.
Look, the reality is, Gary, that a lot of the progressive policies that these new elected officials, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Biaggi, Ramos, the individuals who defeated the IDC members, former IDC members, a lot of the policies that they are putting forth, a lot of the legislation that they want to propose, were things that we have already done for many years. At least, look, I was in the Assembly for 6.5 years before I got elected to the Senate. Things like equal pay, things like free college tuition, universal health care, to name a few, equal pay for women. These are topics that certainly I have and other members in the conference, in the Assembly leadership and the Senate leadership have been pushing for years. But apparently, people that like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and these new individuals did a better job of putting that out there and pushing that agenda than we have done over the years, because I see very little difference in some of the things on some of the progressive policies that they want to push that we haven't been doing for years now.
You see yourself supporting these things and even trying to bring them in the Senate? How do you think some of this will play in the Senate this time around?
I will do whatever I can to bring all these groups together. I'm somewhere in the middle of both groups. I was a Bernie-crat. I am a Bernie-crat. I am a progressive liberal. But I also believe that some of the issues that are more conservative in our conference have to be respected. And we're going to have to come together and work together as a conference, because if not, then we're going to lose what we did in the midterm elections. Look, we have a really good leader. I mean, Stuart Cousins played the long game, was successful. And now she has a problem that I think everybody has to have, is that she has so many members now, such a large conference that she has to keep happy. And, we're grown-ups, and we believe that we're going to do everything we can. There's going to be some internal fighting, and we're going to keep that internally. But at the end of the day, we have to work together. There's no other option.
Are you, I guess it's a silly question, you must be energized. Are you energized? You feel pretty good about what's to come in Albany beginning January 1st?
I mean, of course.
I know, it was a dumb question. I'm sorry.
It's not a dumb. The thing is that, I was in the majority in the Assembly, and I got to be in the minority in the Senate. So I know what it feels to be in both. And now in the majority, you can certainly get more stuff for your community, for your district. I work harder now. I get some more funding for education. Criminal justice reform was something that was near and dear to me. I work closely with the Black Caucus to do some of the things that, when you look at raise the age, there were some things that we had to concede to the Republican that may raise the age less Republican. Maybe we can now tweak that legislation to attain what we want to attain. We talk about the legalization of recreational marijuana, something that, I think the time has come. So now we have a greater chance to push these policies and these legislation with control of both chambers and the governor.
Senator, we're going to have to let you go. The one thing I didn't get to ask you, I wanted to ask you about the Somos conference in Puerto Rico, but we're going to have to leave that for the next time because we're out of time.
Nope.
Thank you so much for taking the time with us, and we'll sure to see you around. Some people may agree with you, some may disagree, but nobody could say that you don't work hard and you don't care, and I know that you really do. And so
I appreciate that.
Thank you for your time this evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you very much, Gary.
Great. That is State Senator Luis Sepúlveda, and you got to hear what he thinks about a bunch of issues. And guess what's going to happen? We're going to take a good night to you. And Monday night on Bronx Talk, we'll be talking about how people can get construction jobs and do something that benefits the Bronx out of all the development we're seeing in the Bronx. Very, very important topic. That'll be on Bronx Talk beginning Monday night. See you next week. Good night.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?